There's something strange about human behavior. We don't always move toward what makes us happy. Sometimes we go back to what hurt us, even when we already know how it ends, even when we've lived through it before. It doesn't always make sense on the surface, but it makes sense somewhere deeper, because most people are not repeating choices, they are repeating feelings. It usually starts earlier than people think, not in adulthood, but in what feels familiar, because the brain learns patterns long before it learns logic. When something emotional happens often enough, the mind stops asking if it's good or bad. It only asks if it's known, and known begins to feel like safe, even when it isn't. So a person grows up learning a strange rule without realizing it. If it feels familiar, it feels right, even if it hurts, even if it drains them, even if it breaks them slowly. And later in life, they don't always choose what is healthy. They choose what their mind recognizes, because recognition feels like control, and control feels like safety, even when it leads them back into the same pain. This is where the loop begins to repeat. A person leaves something that hurts them. At first, there is relief, space, clarity, a sense that it's finally over. But silence changes things, because silence gives the mind room to think. And the mind does not always think in truth. It thinks in emotion. It starts rewriting what happened, not accurately, but softly. It remembers the good moments louder than the bad ones. It blurs the reasons they left. It weakens the memory of pain. And suddenly, what was once clear becomes uncertain. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. So the mind searches for something familiar again, a message, a memory, a reminder. And slowly, the loop opens again. Not because they forgot the pain, but because they remember the connection more than the damage. There is another reason this happens, and it is more uncomfortable to accept. Peace feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. Even if someone wants a better life, their nervous system may not recognize calm as normal. Calm feels empty. Stillness feels wrong. So the mind drifts back toward what it understands, even if what it understands is chaos, even if what it understands is emotional weight. Because chaos has structure. You know what it feels like. You know what happens next. There is comfort in predictability, even when the prediction is pain. And that is why leaving is not always enough, because the body can leave, but the pattern can stay. This loop does not only exist in relationships, it exists in behavior too. People sabotage progress right when things start improving. They delay, they avoid, they destroy what they built, not because they want to fail, but because success feels unfamiliar too, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. So the mind returns to what it knows. Struggle, pressure, emotional noise, because at least struggle feels predictable. And so they rebuild the same cycle again. Start, progress, fear, reset, start again, over and over, until it feels like this is just who they are. But it isn't. It is what they learned to survive. But something changes when the pattern becomes visible, because most loops only survive in silence. The moment you notice repetition, it stops being automatic. Not immediately, but gradually. Awareness interrupts the cycle, and interruption creates choice. And choice is something the loop never had to deal with before. So the pattern slows down. The return becomes less automatic. The pull becomes weaker. Not gone, but weaker. Because now there is distance between feeling and action. And in that distance, there is space to decide differently. People don't always stop repeating what hurts them right away, but they start seeing it. And seeing it is the first break in the loop, because you cannot fix what you believe is normal. And once it stops being normal, it stops being invisible.